US President Donald Trump meets Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Alaska today to discuss the Ukraine war as Kyiv and European capitals anxiously await the outcome.
Joining us to explore the potential risks and rewards of today's summit is diplomatic scholar at Oxford University, Dr. Jennifer Cassidy. Good morning, Jennifer. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for being here.
So the optics alone of this meeting are remarkable. It's Putin's first time on US soil since 2015, despite an ICC arrest warrant. How significant is this moment diplomatically, regardless of the outcome of the meeting?
So it's extremely significant regarding the war, the invasion of Ukraine, not just because of the two leaders meeting, but also where they're meeting. So they're meeting in Alaska, which, as we know, in 1867, the Tsar of Russia actually gave Alaska to America. So geopolitically speaking, this land swapping and the shifting of borders very significantly is very symbolic for Alaska itself. It's also the exact same distance from Washington to Moscow in Alaska, and also what we're seeing from a diplomatic symbolic standpoint is a freezing out of Europe. It's very, very far removed from European soil, let alone the fact that Zelensky himself is not at the meeting, which is quite absurd.
That's an interesting point, because I suppose the fact that Zelensky isn't there, but the dilution of the influence of the EU, no representative of the EU has been invited to these talks. The UK has been frozen out as well. And I suppose since Brexit, it has fractured the influence the EU would have had as a unit. And we can see there what happened, what happened yesterday with Starmer meeting Zelensky. And of course, no one from Germany, no one from France. The heavy hitters of Europe have been completely frozen out. So for a European problem, very few European voices are being heard.
Yeah, and this is... So what we're seeing Europe doing at the moment is 2 weeks ago, then this was a very hastily put together meeting regarding diplomatic summitry. This is very, very fast in terms of how it was put together. But previously they were lambasting this, that they were removed. But now they're being strategic in the sense of doing a lot of back-channel diplomacy, which is behind-the-scenes diplomatic talk to Trump, and really trying to persuade him not to make any concessions, land concessions, or anything, what he's calling land swapping to Russia on behalf of Ukraine at this moment, to ensure that none of this is put on the table. Now, we do know, of course, he has no international authority to make these claims on behalf of Ukraine. But what's worrying in diplomacy is that once it's put on the table, even as some kind of a concession, once it's put on the table as a possibility that this territory, particularly in the eastern part of Ukraine, the annexed part, Russia has 20% annexed territory at the moment of Ukraine. Once that's kind of put around, or floated around as an idea, we could then see a change in a strategic narrative that it is now, if Zelensky doesn't accept it, it is him who is refusing peace. So it's a worrying aspect. And Trump is talking about land swapping, talking about land concessions. He's now backtracked about this a little in the last 24 hours. But we know with Trump, expect the unexpected. We truly do not know what's going to come out of this meeting until they quite simply come out of the meeting.
Yeah, we never know what's going to come out of his mouth either,
Precisely.
And Putin is meant to be bringing some senior economic advisors with him today, and there's talk of him pitching Trump some lucrative US-Russia trade opportunities as part of the peace deal. Could such economic incentives, could it influence Trump's stance on these talks?
Yeah, well, anything could influence Trump, and I don't say that flippantly, and I don't say that in a mocking way at all. What we need to know about these, or acknowledge about these two leaders, they're coming together with two entirely different perspectives on what their outcome of this is. We must note that Putin has an extremely long-term view of history, particularly, of course, when it comes to Russia, or what he's calling now the Russian Empire. We know that when the Berlin Wall fell, when he was in the KGB, that he went back to his room, spent 2 days in his room crying, wouldn't leave. And so the loss of the territory, the democratization of Eastern Europe, and then with the entry of all the Eastern European countries into the EU, all of this is a huge build-up for him for this long-term view of history. We move to the other side of that with Trump. Trump has a very short-term memory. Again, I don't say this in a mocking way. This is just objective evidence. Very short-term memory. Trump is about headlines. Trump is about what he can get in that moment, what the headline can be, what he can sell, what's in it for him, the quote-unquote, the art of the deal, that he will be seen to be the peacemaker in it. So we're seeing two very different sides of what they want to get out of it. But from a diplomatic perspective and just analysing the situation for even the last 3 years alone, Putin's long-term view of history, I cannot see Putin making any concessions at this moment. Usually, if we have a diplomatic summit of this high level during a war or an invasion of this type, you would have seen a leader who would have been invited to the diplomatic summit already have made some type of concession to even get to the table. But Putin has remained remarkably consistent throughout these 3.5 years on all his aims. One, he has refused that any NATO membership of Ukraine is a red line. Any annexed territory of Ukraine will remain in Russian hands, and he does not want any strong securitization of Ukraine, even if they remove themselves.
He's playing the long game here,
truly,
of course. Yeah. And if we look at yourself and many other commentators who are very familiar with Putin's operations over the years, he's been frozen out by Europe for a very long time, diplomatically frozen out of a lot of the world, apart from maybe the likes of Korea and Hungary to a certain extent.
Exactly.
So I suppose Trump validating him by doing this,
precisely,
maybe a crack, the door is cracked open for him to return diplomatically in some way. But if that happens, we're not talking about, I suppose, Putin's idea of being it's 1, 2, 3 years' time. He's looking at 10, 20, 30 years' time, and perhaps going back to the good old days of the USSR. And that's the objective there, which is what Europe is terrified of. Because from the day one, when I suppose Crimea was annexed in 2014, it was like, who is next and what is next? And that's what the surrounding countries are terrified of.
Yeah, and precisely. And the question is, what does Putin want from this? Well, one thing he wants from this is something that he's already get by simply attending the meeting, and that is, as you mentioned, international recognition. And by him attending and standing on US soil with an ICC warrant over his head. Now, we must note that the US is not signed up to the Rome Statute for the ICC. For various reasons. So they are not obliged, morally they should be obliged to arrest him, but they will not. But him even being invited and attending on US soil is a validation that all these attempts by Western leaders, all the greatest sanction regime that we have seen in the last century being imposed on any leader has failed. He is now back in the game, and it's actually almost validating, or at least acknowledging that his remarkably consistent aims and objectives of this war are valid to discuss.
As a lot of people are saying, because Trump, it's almost a vanity project for him at this stage, just to look like this great peacemaker.
Yeah, and we know that even during Trump's campaign, this notion of once I'm in power, I will end this war within 2 days. Of course, we know that didn't happen. Everything is 2 days a day with Trump. That didn't happen, and he has made, I will say, concerted efforts. I won't say that. I think we can say regarding the concerted efforts, what's the motivation behind these concerted efforts? I think it's a vanity project, as you know. But he has, in the last few months, made concerted efforts to try and have these ceasefire talks with Ukraine and Russia, but they've all failed. So, one instant, Zelensky agreed to the ceasefire, Putin did not. And what we've seen is Trump oscillate very extremely between, we saw him lambasting Zelensky, and the world was shown this in the White House. After that, he suspended military aid and he revoked intelligence sharing, which is a mammoth aspect of how they've managed to sustain, Ukraine has managed to sustain the offensive from Russia. But now in the last 2 weeks, he's gone back to not lambasting Putin, but also speaking about Ukrainian casualties, civilians, and also, criticising Putin to a degree. So these oscillating statements between Ukraine and Putin, it's not what a negotiator would do. It's not. It doesn't seem quite weighed up.
It's chaotic, to say the least.
Precisely.
Quite terrifying. Anyway, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning.